Hey there history buffs, and welcome back to the channel. On this day, the 2nd of August 1553, Queen Elizabeth I, or the Lady Elizabeth as she was then, greeted her half-sister, the new Queen Mary I, at Wanstead. Queen Mary I was the eldest daughter and child of King Henry VIII. She was also the only surviving child of Henry's first marriage, which was to Catherine of Aragon. Mary was then joined by two younger half-siblings, the future Queen Elizabeth I, who was Henry's only surviving child from his second marriage to Anne Boleyn, and finally the future King Edward VI, who was the only child from Henry's third marriage to Jane Seymour. Henry's marriage to Jane would be the last one to produce an heir. Despite being the youngest, Edward was his father's only legitimate male heir, and as the royal family followed a line of male primogeniture, Edward ascended the throne upon his father's death in 1547 at the age of 9. Edward ruled for 6 years. He would die at the age of 15 on the 6th of July 1553. He had not been married, and he did not have any heirs of his own. As per the wishes of his father, King Henry VIII, the throne should have passed his eldest sister, Mary, if Edward did not have any heirs. However, Edward made his own device for the succession, which skipped over his two half-sisters, Mary and Elizabeth, and instead named his cousin, Lady Jane Grey, as his heir. However, at the end of Edward's life, Jane was not pregnant, nor did she have any children, so Edward quickly amended his device for the succession, so it named Lady Jane Grey and her heirs male. How much of this was Edward's doing, and how much was the work of the Duke of Northumberland, who also happened to be Jane's father-in-law, is up for debate. With Edward's passing, Lady Jane Grey was now Queen of England. #Justice for Queen Jane. Let me know if you get that reference. Mary, understandably, was not happy about this, as the throne of England was her birthright, and so she rallied her troops ready for a fight. Jane was ultimately fighting a lost cause. Nobody really knew Jane. She'd been largely kept out of the public eye, whereas Mary was once a princess and, to many, the rightful heir and queen of England. She was still the eldest child of King Henry VIII, and having grown up in the public eye, her people had seen her, and she was a figurehead that they could get behind. As the days rolled on, Jane's support dwindled, as many of them swapped their allegiance to Mary, knowing that the jig was up. 13 days later, on the 19th of July 1553, Jane happily relinquished the throne to Mary, who was proclaimed Queen of England. Mary was to now make her way to London from Framlingham. Mary arrived just outside London on the 31st of July. Her sister, the Lady Elizabeth, had got there 2 days earlier. Elizabeth had rode out to swear allegiance to her sister. She was accompanied by 1,000 horsemen and 100 flunkies in velvet coats. Elizabeth finally met with her sister, the Queen, on the 2nd of August 1553 at Wanstead. Mary accepted her sister's allegiance, and the women spent the night at Wanstead House. The next day, the 3rd of August, the sisters rode from Wanstead to Aldgate, where Mary would be greeted as Queen, and Elizabeth was in the place of honour behind her sister. The best thing about this is that we do have some primary sources that record what happened. In the Chronicle of Queen Jane and of 2 years of Queen Mary, and especially of the rebellion of Sir Thomas Wyatt, the anonymous resident in the Tower of London recorded, "By a letter written in London, reporteth that Queen Mary's Grace came to London the 3 days of August, being brought in with her nobles very honourably and strongly. The number of velvet coats that did ride before her as well, strangers as others, was 740, and the number of ladies and gentlemen that followed was around 180. The Earl of Arundel did ride next before her, bearing the sword in his hand, and Sir Anthony Browne did bear upon her train. The Lady Elizabeth did follow her next, and after her the Lord Marquess of Exeter's wife. This next source is quite detailed, which means it's long, so bear with me, and as such I have cut some bits out. This source was written by Charles Wriothesley, the cousin of Thomas Wriothesley, Earl of Southampton. Wriothesley recorded, the 3rd of August 1553, the Queen's Majestic came from Wanstead, and about 6 of the clock at night she lighted at Mr. Bramston's house at Whitechapel, and there changed her apparel, and then accompanied with gentlemen, squires, knights, and lords, with a great number of strangers, all in velvet coats, riding before her, which were above very seahorse, with all the king's trumpeters, heralds, and sergeants at arms. She proceeded to pass through the city, and when she came to the bars without Aldergate, there were rails made where my Lord Mayor and his brethren, the aldermen, stood, and at her Highness, which was in rich apparel, her gown of purple velvet, French fashion, with sleeves of the same, her kirtle purple satin, all thick set with goldsmith work and great pearl, with her full sleeves of the same set with rich stones, with a rich bodice of gold, pearl, and stones about her neck, and a rich bailment of stones and great pearl on her hood. Her palfrey that she rode on richly trapped with gold embroidered to the horse feet. Another rich trapped palfrey led after her Highness by Sir Edward Hastings, master of the horse, my Lord Mayor, and Mr. Recorder, kneeling afore her Highness at the entrance of the bars, saluted her Highness with a proposition after this manner. Mr. Recorder saying, Pleaseth your Highness my Lord Mayor, here present in the name of his brethren and all the commons of this your Highness city and chamber of London, most humbly beseecheth your Highness to be good and gracious sovereign to these commons of this your city, like as your Highness noble progenitors aforetime, and according to their bounden duty at your Highness. My Lord Mayor presenteth here your Highness with the sceptre to the office in token of loyalty and homage. Most humbly welcome your Highness to this your Highness city and chamber of London. Wow, that was a lot harder to read than what I thought it was going to be. All the streets in London, from Aldgate up to the Leaden Hall, and so to the Tower, were richly hung with cloth of array and silk, the streets gravelled at the way, and the citizens standing at rails, with their streamers and banners of every company or occupation, standing at their rails, every company in their best. Also there were 4 great stages between Aldgate and the Tower, where clerks and musicians stood, playing and singing goodly ballads, which rejoiced the Queen Highness greatly. Also there was such a terrible and great shot of guns shot within the Tower, and all about the Tower wharf, that the like hath not been hard. For they never ceased shooting from the time her Highness entered in at Aldgate till she came to Mark Lane End, which was like great thunder, so that there had been like to an earthquake, and all the streets by the way as her highness rode standing so full of people, shouting and crying, Jesus save her grace, with weeping tears for joy, that the like was never seen before. After her highness ladies and gentlewomen came riding, which met her grace at Wanstead Heath. Above them my horse of noblemen's, knights and gentlemen, every one in his master's livery, with spears, which rode 3 in rank, which was a goodly sight to behold. But when they came at Aldgate, the Earl of Worcester, Lord Fitzwater, Sir William Croft, Knight Marshal, and Type Staves stayed them, and would not suffer never a company to enter into the city, but turned them back to other gates of the city, to return such as lay within the city to their lodgings, and the rest to such places without the city where they lay. And thus this night finished, which was on a Thursday. Wow, that was hard. Upon her arrival in London on the 3rd of August, Mary immediately released the Catholics imprisoned by her father. It was clear that this was Mary's victory lap, celebrating her triumph in reclaiming her birthright from Jane, and finally being able to do what for many years she was essentially prepared for. Until Edward came along and ruined it for her. Or Anne Boleyn, depending on how you want to look at it. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, have a wonderful day. Bye!